The last thing I ever wanted to do in my life was start singing. I was working at the mortuary, and I had a house we had in the east side here, straight in the ghetto. I had my friends come over, and they had a band, and they started jamming in my living room. And then one day, I just opened my mouth and started humming melody lines and singing. I don't know why I did it, but I did it. Then once I sang and opened my mouth and did that, the whole band stopped and looked at me and went, "You're the singer now."
On October the 11th, 1994, 5 outcasts from Bakersfield, California, released one of the most important albums of the 20th century. Their self-titled debut record, which was released via independent Los Angeles label Immortal, would come to be seen by many as the birth of nu metal. They were seen to be social pariahs, some of whom relentlessly bullied in school for being different and on the cusp of a breakdown. Substance abuse had already taken hold of singer Jonathan Davis, who was struggling to deal with his disturbing past. Korn would be considered as the pioneers of a genre that dominated TV screens and radio waves for over a decade, a genre that would also give birth to bands such as Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, Roach and Deftones. From high school dropouts to born-again Christians, Korn have become an iconic influence in the world of heavy metal, and this is their story. In 1989, James Schaefer, Reginald Arvizu, and David Silveira were playing in a funk metal band, a genre that arose in the mid to late 80s. In 1984, Red Hot Chili Peppers released their self-titled debut record, which many consider to be the first funk rock record, with funk rock being the precursor to funk metal. The record was a mix-mash of musical influences, from the Jimi Hendrix and Prince-style guitars to the hard-slapping bass and the 80s rap style of vocals. It was certainly more of an experimental record than anything else, with hints of the new wave of 80s pop music hidden in the immense reverb of the album. The funk rock genre sounded more like 70s disco compared to what would become funk metal. It was raw, upbeat, and really unlike anything anyone had ever really heard before. But in the mid-80s, it was still heavily influenced by post-punk as opposed to metal. Schaefer, Arvizu, and Silveira's band LAPD formed in 1989 in Bakersfield, California. They released one studio album called Who's Laughing Now in 1991. And although it didn't receive any commercial success, it laid the groundwork for what would evolve into the Korn sound. It was James Schaefer's love for Faith No More and their album The Real Thing that ultimately guided the direction of LAPD's musical style. It was in 1989 when Faith No More released the single From Out of Nowhere that Schaefer and Arvizu became Faith No More fanatics. This is also how they discovered Mr. Bungle, another band from Mike Patton, the singer of Faith No More, that would become hugely influential in Korn's early days. Faith No More had released 2 albums previous to The Real Thing, but with little commercial success. However, the band were thrown into the spotlight with the release of From Out of Nowhere in 1989 and the now iconic single Epic, released the following year. This was an important era for the transition of metal music. Although in 1989, Motley Crue had a #1 album with Dr. Feelgood, the glam metal pretty boy image was starting to wear off, and people couldn't relate to the millionaire rock star lifestyle. Rock and metal fans wanted to feel part of the community again. Bands like Faith No More and Red Hot Chili Peppers helped people to reconnect with the energetic young sound of modern rock. After all, both bands just looked like a bunch of kids straight out of high school. LAPD were on a very similar path to Faith No More in terms of musical style, and if they had lasted more than one record, no doubt they would have seen some commercial success with the band. LAPD, however, would shortly disband due to the singer's substance addiction.
And the influence, I sort of was like an obstacle. It seemed like, oh, we're gonna have to try extra hard to sort of overcome and get out of this small town, move to LA, and then it seemed like we were just lost amongst all these other bands, you know, trying to do the same thing.
Schaefer, Arvizu, and Silvera wanted to continue on with the band, but instead of just recruiting a new singer, they also wanted to add a second guitarist. This is where LAPD would officially end and Korn would officially start, with the addition of Jonathan Davis and Brian Welch, who would complete the Korn lineup. However, it wasn't just the lineup that would change. Jonathan Davis would bring with him a dark and explosive energy that would help to shape the unique stylings of the five-piece from Bakersfield, California.
I love it. It just makes me feel like I'm doing something positive. Out of my pain came something good. And that's the reason why I'm here. So here I am.
Jonathan Davis was born January 18th, 1971 in Bakersfield, California. His childhood would be that of any typically neglected one. His father, Rick Davis, a keyboard player for Frank Zappa, and his mother, Holly Marie, who was an aspiring actress and dancer, both seemed to be more interested in chasing their own dreams on becoming stars on the big stage, as opposed to providing a stable environment to raise Jonathan, who also had a sister and two other step-siblings. His parents would divorce when he was just 3 years old, and he would mostly be raised by his father. It was also around this time that Davis started to develop serious complications with asthma. Between the ages of 3 to 10, he would be in and out of hospital almost every month, with one incident at 5 years old causing his heart to stop, to which he later commented, "My heart stopped and I didn't see no damn light or hear any music." Davis felt his father had abandoned him as he was always on the road touring as a keyboard player. He was constantly sent to live with different relatives, and he felt as if he'd simply been cast aside. This was to some extent a blessing in disguise, as Jonathan's grandmother had bought him a set of drums, and he'd become obsessed with the music hits that his father had introduced him to at an early age.
It's just how I dealt with my problems. It was my only way to deal with things, and was through singing and writing lyrics about it. When I did it, I had no idea people felt the way I felt. I didn't realize until after the first Korn record was done and people started coming up going, "You know, what you sang about really helped me and you guys saved my life." But before that, I thought I was the only one in the world who was going through that. Nobody really talked about it. And that's why I always got picked on and stuff like that. But it's not about sexuality. It's about being sensitive. And I wasn't ashamed to say that I was sensitive. Not ashamed to say that I cry. I'm not ashamed. I get my feelings hurt over stuff because those are real emotions. I think people need to deal with those things, and then it wouldn't be so bad.
By the time he was 5, he had even played drums on stage with his dad. But this short-lived and probably too late form of parental bonding wouldn't be enough to stop Jonathan finding a darker and ever so alienated path throughout his teenage years. By his own words, Davis said he was constantly picked on in school, mostly for his small frame and the fact he was socially awkward. He was considered to be a nerd and an easy target for the playground bullies. Subconsciously, Davis saw this as another opportunity to delve deeper into the world of music. Jonathan's dad owned a music store that often had music instructors, so he took it upon himself to learn as many instruments as possible. By the time he was 12, he had already learned to play the piano, the violin, upright bass, and clarinet. It was pretty clear that Davis was using music as an escape form from the tortures of his real life, something that would continue to grow within him. Whilst the schoolyard bullies could be drowned out with his love for musical instruments, a new nemesis had appeared before Davis that would drag him through hell and back. She's the most evil, fucked up person I've met in my whole life. She hated my guts. Davis had a new stepmother entering his teenage years, a figure that most likely gave him the final push he was looking for to venture into a darker path in life. In some sick way, I had a sexual fantasy about her, and I don't know what that stems from or why, but I always dreamt about fucking her and killing her. It's not clear the exact lengths of torment Jonathan's new stepmother would go to in order to alienate and manifest such thoughts, but one thing was clear. The experiences Davis had as a child and as a teenager would trigger something deep inside, something so dark that by the age of 16, Davis had secured a job at a local mortuary where he would assist in the autopsies of adults and even infants.
Poor people losing their loved ones, and in the funeral business, it's you see it more. And when I was just working as an autopsy assistant, and the more doing autopsies, it's me, some stiffs, and a doctor. That's it. I could deal with. But when you actually see the families and stuff like that, it started to get to me. And then when I was young doing autopsy, I was autopsying kids and stuff like that. So it was bad. I'm glad I got out of it.
By his own later confession, he admitted this led to him suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. He said, "I had to have a lot of therapy to make the nightmares go away." It's easy to see how Korn's debut album would become such a disturbingly chaotic masterpiece.
It was all ego. Just wanted to be famous rock star, you know? It's like wanted to write music. There was a little bit of the art was in there. It was like I wanted to create something that people could enjoy and everything. It just got twisted because all I did was stare at albums and watch videos of all these rock stars that were like Motley Crue, Kiss, and all these bands that were just known for being all about partying. I was given that job later on in life, in my early 20s. It was like, here you go. Every dream you had, you can have.
Korn would officially form in 1993, and the full lineup would consist of Jonathan Davis, James Monkey Schaefer, Brian Head Welch, Reginald Arvizu, and David Silvera. Head had known Schaefer and Arvizu for some time, and Davis had been releasing his own demos as well as being the singer for another band called Sex Art. They were somewhat drawn together over two things: their hatred for Bakersfield and their love for a wide range of musical styles. Davis once recalled that the only thing to do in Bakersfield was to get high on drugs, get arrested, or have a kid, and watch them repeat the process. It's no surprise that Korn turned out to pioneer a new genre. Davis had been obsessed with Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, and Ministry, whilst Brian Head Welch learned to play guitar to Queen's We Will Rock You. And other members of the band were heavily influenced by Run DMC and the early funk rock of Red Hot Chili Peppers. Throw in the extreme influence of Sepultura on top of that, and you've got the ingredients for something incredibly unique.
I listen to more like English new romantic shit like Adam Ant, Duran Duran, and all those kind of bands. So The Cure, that was my Korn. Well, I had a brief little period where I was listening like Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, and Dio. My dad became a born-again Christian and burned them all and guarded me, scared the fucking shit out of me, saying the devil was gonna take me over and all this shit. So then that pushed me in a different direction, and that's when I got Twitch by Ministry, down to Christian Death, all that goth shit, and then it just turned into the new romantic, new wave shit. I really loved Adam Ant and Duran Duran. Those were my two, and The Cure. And then after that, I started DJing. That's when I got into New York freestyle music, and that's all the club music was going on in New York in the 80s, and that was my thing for a while. And then the album Vulgar Display of Power came out, and I was like, holy shit, I loved it, because I loved the groove part of it. It just, we wanted to make you move, but there was this heaviness about it, and after that I was listening to more and more rock music.
It wouldn't be long before the group would officially decide on the name Korn and relocate to Los Angeles, where they would eventually rent a studio called Underground Chicken Sound in the Huntington Beach area. And although Davis had physically escaped the torture of Bakersfield, the disturbing thoughts he harbored as a teenager and the PTSD he'd unknowingly developed working at a mortuary would be unleashed on their debut record. During the summer of 1993, Korn started to play local shows around the Huntington Beach area, and also started to work with a producer called Ross Robinson. Robinson had started to produce records in 1991 and would later become known as the godfather of nu metal, as he went on to produce records for the likes of Limp Bizkit, Sepultura, Soulfly, and even Slipknot.
It was like that before we made the record, and I used to like literally pray that those guys, one of them wouldn't die. I was so terrified for their lives. I don't know why. Every street sign in Huntington had a Korn sticker on it. The insanity of that environment. Then the music was all dark, so heavy in an internal way that you couldn't deny it. It was there.
Although Robinson had some experience of working in studios in the late 80s as a musician, he was given his first full production role in 1991 when he worked on the debut record for the Los Angeles-based industrial metal band Fear Factory. Before the pair managed to rent Underground Chicken Sound Studios, Robinson and Korn actually started working on a demo tape called Niedermeyer's Mind, which would be released in October of 1993. But they didn't exactly have much of a budget for the studio, so Robinson would sneak them into another studio late at night to record this demo. This studio belonged to singer Blackie Lawless of the 80s hair metal band Wasp. The demo tape had all of the key ingredients of the new metal sound that people would come to recognize over the coming years. But first, the band had to find their audience, and it wouldn't be long before the disaffected and alienated youth of America would discover Korn.
Knocked me out. He goes, bop, right in the top of my head. Come on.
Indigo Ranch Studios in Malibu, California would be the setting for Korn's debut album. This is where Ross Robinson and the band would record their first full-length record together, which would be released on October the 11th, 1994. Musically, the album was eerie and creepy, full of anger and torment. Lyrically, it was probably one of the darkest albums that had been released at that time. Jonathan Davis essentially used the recording process as his artistic expression and therapy, which for him was an expression of a dark and troubled childhood that he couldn't escape. This place inside my mind, a place I like to hide. You don't know the chances. What if I should die? Lyrics taken from the opening track Blind was an instant outcry from Jonathan, talking to the kids that bullied him throughout school. Most of the lyrical content throughout the first record was Jonathan Davis talking to the people that made his life hell throughout all of his teenage years. This was his opportunity to confront the people that had made his life so difficult and miserable. This is also why so many kids that had been cast aside by society would come to almost worship the band.
I would either tweak on music or I would just get on my computer and go into the sickest world of internet porn or whatever and get sucked into that. It was just so grimy.
Korn would release 4 singles from their debut record: Blind, Need To, Chutes and Ladders, and Clown. And although the record wasn't an instant success, there was a buzz surrounding the band, and the crowds of teenage kids were growing at every show. It wouldn't be long before Korn's new fans would be flocking to Jonathan Davis to tell him how they were also bullied in school, and that Korn's shows gave them a place to not only feel welcome, but a place to express their own rage and anger towards a world that had forgotten all about them. This is where music took a drastic change in ideological direction. Metal music in the 70s and 80s had been more upbeat. Even if lyrically the story addressed a sinister issue, the music would mostly provoke positive feelings. Whereas Korn's music would directly attach itself to the very darkness that was taking a grip on the youth of America. Even the cover artwork for Korn's debut album addressed this issue. The innocent girl happily playing on the swings, yet the dark shadow of a sinister man behind her suggested that innocence itself was somehow soaked with evil. There was no escaping the demons of society, which is exactly how Jonathan Davis felt about the person he was.
I was picked on just so bad. I had like guidance counselors telling me I was gay, and they're sending me to gay counselors. I'm just like telling those fools, what the fuck? I'm telling you I'm straight. Most of California, other than the West Coast cities and stuff, were pretty hardcore conservative still. And they still look and they still judge and they still do that.
And so we were in this little neighborhood and the school was 3 houses down. So we walked home and just rode bikes in our neighborhood. We didn't go outside of the neighborhood and it was safe, so we thought.
One of the most interesting aspects about Korn's debut album, though, was the actual combination of Korn and Ross Robinson. On one hand, Korn were drinking on a daily basis, and some members were even abusing methamphetamines, whilst Ross Robinson was straight edge, opting for a daily wheatgrass smoothie. In an interview with Metal Hammer magazine, Jonathan Davis said, "Ross is a very pure and clean-spirited person, and you feel that when you're with him. He's the kind of person that can draw that out of you. I feel very safe with Ross." It seemed that Robinson almost acted as the band's therapist throughout the process, and without him, Korn may not have even finished their first record, or it would have at least been a different beast. 1995 would be a huge year for Korn. Although the album wasn't an instant success, the band landed some impressive tour slots. The year would see them share a stage with the likes of Biohazard, Megadeth, Sick of It All, Marilyn Manson, and even Ozzy Osbourne.
I was really into horror films, sci-fi films, so I really got into that young. That's what led me into becoming a coroner's assistant back in the day when I did autopsies, because I loved horror films so much. It was something about being scared and just that dark vibe. I've always been, the darker side of things inspire me other than the happier things. I mean, I have tons of happy shit in my life, and I think it's great, but the dark things are what inspire me to write music. That's my go-to to get it out.
By the end of 1995, they had played around 200 shows and released 4 singles from their debut record, and the initial slump of album sales would be overshadowed by the fact that whilst touring with Ozzy Osbourne, Korn's debut album had been certified gold on January the 29th, 1996, and was selling close to 20,000 copies a week. It was official. Korn were about to become global superstars. Despite what turned out to be a hugely successful 18 months of touring throughout 1995 and 96, and a gold-certified debut album, the press was silent. Most mainstream radio stations outright refused to play Korn songs, and MTV tried to avoid Korn at all costs, although they did give them a small amount of off-peak exposure. However, artists such as Machine Head and Sepultura were now huge fans of the band. Sepultura had even decided to hire Ross Robinson to produce their album Roots, released in February of 96. Although the album was now selling like crazy, Korn was still struggling to get any commercial support. Their label had managed to secure a few radio play rotations on some graveyard radio shows that hardly anyone listened to, and while some magazines were keeping a close eye on the band, that was pretty much all they were doing. This was, of course, all of little interest to the band, as their record label had pressured them to get back into the studio straight away in May of 1996 to record their second record, ready for the release in October of the same year, which would mark a 2-year anniversary from the release of their debut.
It's like catching on a lot quicker here than it did at home.
Do you have any theories on why that is?
I'm not sure. I really don't know.
Korn's debut record had now sold over 600,000 copies, but the label were worried that fans would quickly forget about them without commercial and mainstream support from the press. Unknown to the band, however, it would actually be the Korn fans that helped push the band into the mainstream by relentlessly calling radio stations and MTV, asking to hear Korn and watch their videos. Korn's second album, Life is Peachy, would be released on October the 15th, 1996, and would peak at number 3 in the US Billboard charts, as well as land the band a top 40 album chart position in the UK. Korn were without doubt here to stay.
Being fashionable used to mean looking good. Well, thanks to a fad that started in the Pacific Northwest, high fashion now means, well, you decide.
Grunge had dominated the early 90s with bands like Soundgarden, Nirvana, and Alice in Chains after the Seattle sound had hit the mainstream.
I'm not a death rocker, and I don't wear black, but sometimes I like to collect weird things like that. So.
Nevermind, released in 1991, was and still is considered by many as the commercial breakthrough record for the grunge movement. However, no one saw what was about to happen to the music industry following the death of Kurt Cobain. It's said that grunge died the day Kurt Cobain took his own life in 1994, but looking at the early success of Korn, it's difficult to dispute that nu metal wasn't already set to steal the spotlight. Korn's second album, Life is Peachy, had already given the band a top 5 chart position on the American billboards, and the band were becoming an integral part of America's alternative youth culture.
What did you guys learn about your fans? You were mentioning they got some pretty good creativity going on.
There's lots of great stuff. It's insane. There's a lot of sick stuff too.
Throughout the mid-90s, Korn had been wearing a great deal of Adidas clothing on stage, which led to swarms of Korn fans buying Adidas products, so Korn naturally thought they could strike a deal with Adidas, especially since Run DMC, an influence of Korn, had signed a huge deal with the company in the late 80s, but that wasn't to be the case. Adidas told Korn they don't sponsor musical groups anymore, which opened the door for another sports brand, Puma, to offer the band a wallet-busting $500,000 endorsement deal, which at the time, for a band like Korn, was almost unthinkable. Puma could obviously see the influential power of a band like Korn on the American youth market.
It's tough. We've been throwing up all day over this.
Work out and look like this.
We know it's done by fans, so we're not looking for some top notch. Like that could be the winner. You never know.
Not only would this deal be financially lucrative for Korn, but it also saw Puma airing a nationwide TV commercial featuring the band's music, directed by Kevin Kerslake. Kerslake had already directed music videos for the likes of Nirvana, Faith No More, Pantera, and even the Rolling Stones. This commercial would expose millions of young Americans to Korn's music.
Korn's After School Special.
Hey fuckers,
Tune in to Korn After School Special.
Thursday at 4:30.
Gonna fuck you up.
Korn would also be one of the first bands to really utilize a brand new emerging technology called the internet that would revolutionize the face of the music industry in the coming years.
What you guys do is so fresh and sweet, you don't have to be able to solo.
Sure, we all know what the internet is today, but in the mid to late 90s, it was seen as a magical and mysterious leap forward in electronics. No one knew how powerful it was going to become. Korn, however, saw the opportunity and seized it. When they began recording their third studio album, Follow the Leader, in the spring of 1998, they decided to also take control of their own promotional campaigns. They would launch their own TV series called Korn's After School Special, which would be hosted on their website under the label of Korn TV. The series was dubbed part variety show, part new music showcase, and part talk show satire, and would air every Thursday at 4:30 p.m, with the first show taking place on the 5th of March, 1998.
Not much. Korn. That's what's going on. Korn.
It was an incredibly unique look into the world of alternative culture, and most importantly, the band. By utilizing this new technology called the internet, it helped to put Korn into a category all by themselves. Not just musically, but creatively. Most artists were just trying to get their music videos played on MTV. They weren't trying to create their own community in the same way that Korn were. This online TV series gave fans an intimate lifeline with the band, and it was the only way to really connect with them other than seeing them live. There was no such thing as social media to give you a day-by-day update of everything the band was doing. Whether this was clever marketing by the band or their new record label, Warner Music, or if it was just the band's way of getting closer to the fans, what was certain is that Korn were laying down the foundations to releasing their biggest record of the early nu metal era, a record that would spawn a now iconic music video, Freak on a Leash. 1998 would be seen by many as the year nu metal had its commercial breakthrough, and Korn's album Follow the Leader would be the catalyst that launched the genre into the mainstream. MTV had finally decided the band were worthy of prime-time air coverage. Not only had the innovative music channel featured members of Korn on the infamous MTV Cribs, but the network was also showcasing lengthy promotional specials in support of Korn's upcoming new record. Follow the Leader would be released in the summer of 1998 on August the 18th, and over the course of the next 12 months, Korn would release 5 singles from the LP: All in the Family, Got the Life, Children of the Korn, BBK, and Freak on a Leash. Got the Life would chart on the US Billboards at number 11, and the accompanying music video would showcase the band in an entirely new light. Korn now had access to expensive cars like Ferraris and Mercedes, and Jonathan Davis was taking full advantage of Korn's new endorsement deal with Puma. Not only was this video a step up in terms of production for them, but it was also aired round the clock on MTV, and Korn became the new face of cool, modern alternative culture. Follow the Leader would also land the band their first #1 album on the official US Billboard 200 chart, selling 268,000 copies in its first week. Freak on a Leash, released on February the 25th, 1999, would become one of the most iconic and unforgettable music videos of the nu metal era. Korn would be seen in an enclosed room with hundreds of light holes highlighting the band, and aside from the unique animation of the security guard playing with the ghosts of children, one aspect of the music video caught everyone's attention: the slow-motion bullet that ripped through an entire town, and most notably, a water cooler. This video also introduced millions of young alternative fans to the heavy signature breakdowns of nu metal. Go! In the coming years, there would be a surge of nu metal bands and albums topping the charts on a global scale. Deftones, Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, System of a Down, and Linkin Park would all enjoy commercial success between the years of 1999 up to around 2004, when nu metal took a steep decline in popularity. It does appear to be the case that Korn helped to lay the foundations of nu metal when they released their first album in 1994, and maybe without them, nu metal may not have been as big as it was, despite it being short-lived. Whilst nu metal culture may have faded into the underground, bands that followed in Korn's success are now global mainstream artists, drawing in millions of new fans into the world of metal and alternative music every year. Even Korn themselves are still dominating part of that industry with their latest record, Requiem, released on February the 4th, 2022, landing the band over 15 top 20 chart positions worldwide. To date, Korn have sold over 40 million records worldwide, won numerous awards including 2 Grammys, and have without a doubt given countless lost souls a place to call home. Korn are now one of the most successful artists of modern times, and certainly have got the life. Check out the links below for Korn merchandise, subscribe for more content, or watch another documentary right here on Raw Music TV.